All right, I'm back once again. This is Imuna Yisrael Solonomics 101. Today I wanted to talk to you. I'm actually like a little bit behind schedule, but I wanted to talk to you about Underground. The latest docudrama or mini-series drama has 10 episodes that came on WGN, aired Wednesday, and it will be coming on Wednesdays. I think this is very interesting, especially for those who want to take it beyond television, to be able to get into a very important part of history. Like I said, not the only part of history as it relates to quote unquote black people, but to really understand the position and the epigenetics, let me say, of what is happening today. And this is some feedback, some different people that were on Twitter that were tweeting. This sister says, I'm learning so much about my history. And I said that before in another video that referenced why some black people are not qualified to talk about slavery, and some people were upset, but I love you too. But the reality is, like I was saying, we're learning about our history from television as opposed to going back into these books and going back into these narratives and going back into this information and be able to source it for ourselves. It says here, slavery is folded within it and not at all its center, says Lisa Woolfolk, a professor at the University of Virginia who studies representations of American slavery. I'm going to jump down here. She says some people complain about slavery fatigue. They don't want to hear no more. It's too many movies. She says we want to have in safely away so it doesn't impede on our everyday life. It, meaning slavery. Woolfolk says, but one way to understand why our present is the way it is rooted in the past. And then she quotes somebody by saying the past is never dead. It isn't even past. So why does Imuna keep making these updates and giving it to you about slavery? It's because we're still experiencing the remnants of it today. But if we don't understand it from a point of understanding ourselves and why we do what I do, the powers within ourselves to make certain changes to better our position. Ebony was online. Ebony was watching Ebony magazine and making a comment that it's interesting how the preacher is really the one that can't read, and instead it's his wife. Black women really are the backbone. Another woman says the black slave woman's cry, it's still our cry. That was Sophia A. Nelson. That was very, very interesting because in the narrative, they thought it was the preacher who could read, but all the while at night, it was his wife who could read, and she was telling him what the script said. So there's a lot of subliminals. This is the sister who plays one of the lead characters. She says, so hard to watch, hard to do. But you have to watch it. Here's another review that the man said the same thing. Underground is great, but it's tough to watch. And then Cocky says white woman being passive aggressive since antebellum. And it's interesting to note why in the movie you're going to see some passive aggressive behavior here. But when you understand what's going on, and I know some of us do because, we've seen a number of these things or had these conversations, but what I picked up in the movie is that the slave master may have raped, and those were his children, and she was passive aggressive towards the black woman because she had her man's children, so to say. We see some more comments. So there was a lot of chatter going around concerning this. It says the pain, I couldn't have him growing up like this. And this was from the tragic scene where the mother, which was another form of resistance, running away was just one form of resistance during slavery. There was so many different ways that the slaves resisted, small or great. But in this particular scene that you're about to see, one of the ways that a lot of the slave mothers, not all, but there's a substantial amount of slave mothers resisted was by taking the lives of their children, so that they wouldn't have to grow up in slavery. So this is Rosalie's character running to get the baby out of the water when she realized the baby's mother, who had given birth, drowned the baby. And she said, now the baby is free. And so there were a lot of mothers oftentimes that prayed for the freedom of their children. And sometimes, like in this scene that they're depicting, they took that into their own hands by actually doing the deed. And in some places, it became, we're punishable for the midwives because that's master's money right there. So basically, this is their way to get back at master. And I know it sounds wild and crazy, but this is the depths. And it still puts over today with the abortion issue. This is something that still, carries over today within the psyche quote-unquote black people. And this scene is what I was talking about. That's the master, and that is Rosalie's mother. And again, I'm bringing these out because the indifference. The European man was preying on the so-called black woman. At the same time, his wife felt powerless to do anything about his exploits. And so what I received from it, it didn't reveal it as yet, but there's 9 more episodes, so we're going to see if I'm right or wrong. But what I received from it is that he impregnated her, and these are actually his children. So the slave master's children are playing with his wife's children. And so she makes a sly comment about whether or not she's going to sell him. You know, they're going to sell him, and it was really to get back at the mother. That's what I perceived, just based on measuring it up against the narratives and how, you know, Harriet Jacobs' incidents in the life of a slave girl and other narratives that let you know that this was commonplace. This is what they did, but the men, the European men, the slave masters, did not take responsibility for their children. So basically, this was my feedback on this series. I think it's going to be interesting for many reasons. Not that it's just a slave narrative, but to really show you that everybody wasn't compliant. Everybody didn't go along, but it came with a high price. And everyone could not run away. There are statistics that tell you that men were amongst the most who would run away because they had the most opportunity and ability. They were often trusted to go out of town, you know, go with the master, see off the plantation. In this instance, Rosalie is saying she hasn't been 2 minutes off the plantation. So oftentimes women didn't travel far enough to have a knowledge or a working knowledge of outside. That coupled with the fact that they had ties concerning their children when they did have children, that it was harder to run away with children. So oftentimes you would see men running away. You would see men who even had family still not able to take that level of subjugation and choosing for freedom to run away oftentimes without their family. So when we talk about men running away and men being deadbeat dads and not taking care of their children, a lot of this, the epigenetics of what we're talking about, is rooted right here. And if we just a little bit get past the initial pain, the initial sting, and begin to process this information so that we can have understanding and not go over the redundant conversation. Well, why is this? You know, we often say, why this and why that? But we don't really want to know why, because when it is presented before us to begin to evaluate this information, we say we're tired of talking about that. And so I just thought it was interesting. I will be bringing forth hopefully a weekly feedback of what it is that I'm seeing. So thank you for tuning in. My name is Amuna Yisrael. Until next time, continue to be that change that you desire to see in the world. One.